way of introductions. If you don't know me or haven't met me yet, my name is Matthew Camisa. I am the Regional Shellfish Supervisor for the New Bedford office. I'm joined today by Dr. Chrissy Pettipas, who's the Shellfish Program Leader, and Wayne Castingway, who is the Regional Shellfish Supervisor in the Gloucester office, as well as a whole slew of other DMF staff, deputy directors, policy analysts, and of course, your area biologists. Most of them are on as well, in case they need to answer questions and certainly listen to everyone's feedback. So I have a brief presentation to provide this afternoon, and then we'll have a question and answer session at the end, and hopefully we'll all be on the same page by the time this is done. Okay, so I think we all know that we follow the NSSP guide for the control of mollusc and shellfish, the 2019 revision, the model ordinance. That's our Bible. This sets the requirements for shellfish sanitation, and it's what we are compared to during our audit with FDA. They judge how we manage areas against how we're supposed to manage areas as spelled out in the model ordinance. And I think everybody's probably familiar by now with our sanitary classifications, of which there are 5: approved, conditional, conditionally approved, restricted, conditionally restricted, and prohibited. So DMF classifies every growing area based on NSSP standards for fecal coliform. Those are the water samples we collect. And we're required to do sampling and testing from each growing area, depending on the status of that area. So what does the model ordinance actually say about mooring areas? So if you look at the chapter 4 at 06 mooring area section of the model ordinance, mooring areas cannot be classified as approved. So pollution assessments must be completed, including information about boat type and usage, densities of boats in the area, occupancy rates on those boats, seasonal use patterns, discharge rates, that's wastewater and sewage discharge rates, no discharge zone enforcement and documentation, and access to pump out boats and facilities in the area or in the surrounding areas. If it is determined that a mooring area is not a pollution source, it can be open. If it is a pollution source, we need to assess the impacts on adjacent areas through dilution analysis. And this language, I know there's an awful lot to read on this slide here. This language is from the MO, and it is included in the marina and mooring area policy that you've already received, a week and a half ago or so now. So definitions: what is a marina? What is a mooring area? The 2019 revision of the model ordinance, which is the one we're still operating under right now, says that a marina is any water area with a structure which is used for docking and constructed to provide temporary or permanent docking space for more than 10 boats. Very straightforward. No one disputes that. All of our marinas are in the closed status during the boating season or while there are more than 10 boats at that marina. The mooring area definition is any water area that is used to provide temporary or permanent anchorage for more than 20 boats. Now, just last year at the Louisiana ISSC meeting, a proposal was submitted and adopted to redefine the mooring area as any water area that is used to provide temporary or permanent anchorage for more than 20 boats with marine sanitation devices. So that language was added to account for mooring areas like 22 Catuit skiffs that don't have heads on them, they don't have MSDs, they don't have berths, there's no occupancy on those overnight. So Then the definition of an MSD, the Coast Guard defines those. They're either a type 1, 2, or 3, which is a chemical treatment or a biological treatment or a holding tank with some sort of maybe composting component to it. So the bucket, the portable bucket, the portable small toilets are not considered MSDs. So those do not count towards the MSD count when assessing a mooring area. So there are many FDA staffers that would prefer to have all mooring area closed to shell fishing all the time. But this is a discussion we have with them repeatedly, and it's not just us, it's every state that has mooring areas up and down the East Coast. So we've been working on a marina and mooring area policy since before Jeff Kennedy retired, to allow mooring areas to remain or be placed in the open status while the boats are there. This table describes what actions need to be taken to place a mooring area in the open status during the boating season. So again, I just want to reiterate this column on the right-hand side. This is an outline of the requirements if the area is going to be in the open status during the boating season. For all those mooring areas that close for seasonal water quality, or they close anyways because the town doesn't want to manage them or can't manage them for the summer, none of these apply beyond your regular growing area monitoring and patrol. So we can go through each of these. Hopefully this won't take too long. It's not confusing. If the mooring area is closed during the boating season, no requirements beyond routine growing area patrol. If it doesn't meet the new definition of greater than 20 MSDs, there are no additional requirements beyond routine patrols. That's a type 1. There are many of you have a lot of mooring areas that are now going to fall into that category. Type 2, if there's greater than 20 MSDs, but there's no overnight berths on the boats, pump out records need to be made available for review, and again, continue routine growing area patrol. Type 3 has more than 20 MSDs and the boats have berths, but the town has overnight restrictions. You're not allowed to spend the night on the boat. Then we need to add documented patrols to ensure compliance with the ban on overnight stays and of course routine patrols. Type 4, if overnight stays are allowed, but there are no houseboats or liveaboards, then prior notification of stays should be required, and you would be required to conduct random through-hull checks. Make sure the Y valves are closed, make sure there's locks where there need to be locks, so folks aren't accidentally releasing. And type 5 is, of course, it just keeps building in complexity. If houseboats and liveaboards are present, then there needs to be daily area patrols, prior notification of overnight stays, and again, random through-hull checks. And of course, pump out compliance verification for houseboats, because houseboats are technically not supposed to be pumped out using CVA big funded pump out facilities. So they're supposed to rely on commercial pump out businesses. So what does this all mean to the mooring areas that we have in place in Massachusetts now? There are 93 mooring areas that are conditionally approved in Massachusetts. Out of those 93, 63 are already closed during the boating season for some other reason, whether it be seasonal water quality or management strategy for the town. So that leaves only 30 mooring areas that remain open during the boating season. Out of those 30, 16 will not meet the new definition for a mooring area. So those 16 that have greater than 20 boats, but less than 20 MSDs, no new requirements beyond normal routine growing area patrols. So that leaves 14 mooring areas that are potentially impacted by this policy. And those 14 are in the table on the right. So Bourne has one, it's Pecasset, Red Brook Harbor, very complex area. mooring areas all throughout it. At one point, we made the whole area a mooring area. And then there are 8 in Chatham, in Stage Harbor, Mitchell River, Oyster Pond, Mill Pond, and Riders Cove. Dartmouth has one in the Ponegantset Bay. Duxbury has one right off the ramp in the Harbor Master Shack there. Gloucester has one in the Annisquam River. It's the main stem of the Annisquam River. And Lagoon Pond, which is shared by Oak Bluffs and Tisbury, they each have their half of Lagoon Pond falls into that category. So these are the mooring areas that could be affected by this policy and may require some additional monitoring, patrol, and documentation if it's not already being done. I can tell you that Renee and her crew down in Chatham have set the standard for how to manage and operate their mooring areas. They do a fantastic job of patrol and documentation. They have restrictions on overnight occupancy. Terry has worked very closely with them. He's been the area biologist for decades down there. So a lot of how we formulated our decisions came about through discussions with Renee and her crew. And I did speak to, or at least called everyone else on this list today to try to make sure everybody was on the same page and knew that they'd be on this list. So if you're not on this list, you can breathe a little sigh of relief. If you are, no sweat, we can work through it. So this policy really provides a path for municipalities to keep these mooring areas open. Also, it provides the opportunity for municipalities to open areas that previously were not. Now, if it's a water quality area, you can't open it. It's closed for water quality anyways. But if it's not, water quality is good, it's just closed during the boating season and you want to have it open, there's a mechanism to do that. That table outlines the requirements that would be expected for you to accomplish that. So what type of inspection and documentation do we need? One of our area biologists put together these 2 examples, just as we figured if we're asking for something extra or requiring something extra, the least we could do is provide an example of the information we're looking for and maybe a form that you could use if you find it useful. On the left is a checklist for performance standards for mooring areas. And on the right is a very basic vessel inspection form. If you have your own forms, that's fine, as long as it has similar information, probably a date and initial of whoever filled out the checklist or conducted the inspection, whatever works best for you. And of course, these need to be made available to DMF, especially if your area is selected for FDA audits and the peer review process. So a couple items to discuss. How important are your mooring areas to shellfish harvesting? If they're not, if there's no resource under your mooring area, then it might not be that painful to just have it closed during the boating season. And I suspect that's how a lot of them are already set up. That's a decision the town has to make. If you have a mooring area over your most productive shellfish area, then you're going to want to consider keeping it open, and we've laid out the matrix for how to do that. How hard would it be for your town to patrol? Only you can answer that question. Are there some strategies to close some areas but leave others open? Sure, you could consider moving mooring areas to non-productive shellfish areas. You could consider moving houseboats and liveaboards and the larger vessels with MSDs to one section of the mooring area and just close that while leaving the remainder or larger portion or other areas open. What's acceptable for a documented checklist and inspection form? You tell us. We've given you an example. Perhaps you've already got a form that works. We're open for suggestions and discussion on that. A good question, should you maintain existing mooring areas that no longer meet the definition? There's going to be dozens and dozens of those. You'll want to talk to your area biologist about that and talk to your town about that. Do you like having that mooring area with its own sub-classification area that you can open and close or change the status as you need to, whether it be for management decisions or in reaction to fuel spill or sewage, accidental sewage discharge off of a vessel? If you don't want to maintain those areas as mooring areas, they could be reabsorbed by the surrounding parent area. And that's a discussion you should have with your area biologist and think that one through. And who should you reach out to at DMF? Of course, you can call myself or Wayne in Gloucester and New Bedford, and Chrissy as well, but I would definitely start with your area biologist. We'd like to get them more engaged with this process, and they're the ones that are ultimately going to be your boots on the ground to help you set up those areas the way that makes the most sense and to make sure we're doing it consistent with the model ordinance. So before we dive into questions, I guess I would just ask Chrissy and Wayne if I've missed anything, if they want to add something, or correct me on anything I may have misspoke on.
I think you did a great job, Matt. I think I would just add that I know we've had some communities reach out and ask about using mooring info. So some communities use mooring info to manage mooring areas and can, build a checklist to document patrols. And that's certainly something that you could use rather than, a paper checklist. So there are, as Matt mentioned, there are several, pathways to, doing the requirements, completing the performance criteria to keep a mooring area in the open status that triggers that category 4 or category 5. Wayne?
I don't really have anything to add. Chrissy, Matt, you did a great job. Just from my perspective, just to emphasize, this only applies if you have mooring areas that you want to keep open during the boating season. So as Matt said, most towns choose not to do that. So it's going to be very limited in terms of impact, and it's your choice.
Thank you. Okay, so does anybody have any questions?
Matt, Gary Buckminster, town of Wareham. First and foremost, this is going to be a royal pain in the ass for most of us, especially where we have, let's say we're looking at Buzzards Bay, we're looking at Onset Bay. I've got 4 different mooring fields in a congested area. What distance am I going outside of each mooring field? And am I just going into closing the entire BB that's within Onset Bay for the situation?
Gary, I'm not sure I understand your question. Which area is it?
So when you're in Onset Bay, let's say I have a couple areas that are currently closed, and one of them falls under the shellfish sanitation that we did a couple of years ago back when Greg Sawyer was still here. But we do have other mooring fields that met the requirements. However, I'm just wondering, are we supposed to close the entire BB, or are we allowed to like make lines and reduce the size of the closure within that area?
Oh, sure. If you're talking about establishing a mooring area, yeah, we would draw it. We draw it however you want to encompass the boats in the mooring area, okay, if it meets the 20 MSD minimum.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Yep. It doesn't need to be the whole area. Thank you.
And Onset isn't on this list, right?
No.
So for the vast majority, there should be really no examples of mooring areas that haven't already been identified and delineated.
And I'm actually surprised we're not on that list, because we did have to make the adjustment to the closure lines that were in Onset Harbor. Like I said, a couple of years back when Greg Sawyer was here, we ended up having to change the lines going through the mooring field out to a navigation aid to another point on some other property, and we expanded the closure area quite a bit.
So Gary, I'll weigh in. I'll speak to that a little bit. When the mooring area requirements first came out, many mooring areas were immediately created, classified as such with their own sub area, and placed in the closed status during the boating season.
Okay.
There were some mixed signals about whether or not that needed to be done, but by and large, most areas, that's what happened. Okay. There were some areas that never happened, Chatham being one of them. And from day one, it was, we think we can manage this. You know, we think we can keep it open. How do we protect public health? And in the absence of this mooring area policy, folks were already doing the right things and taking the right steps to get that done. So there were mixed signals to the area biologists, even I would argue, years ago, about whether or not an area had to be closed or could remain open. Now I can share with you that Chatham has been selected during the peer FDA audit process. It was presented to them. They know we have mooring areas that remain open year round. It was not written up as a deficiency. It was not written up as a new and emerging concern. So
Okay.
they are well aware of how we're doing it, and the model ordinance allows us to do what we're doing. So that's what we're accomplishing here. Yep,
Okay, thank you. I'll reach out to Mitchell when he's back. Thank you so much.
sure, you bet. Looks like John Wolf.
Yes, hi. Just a question, and I may have some bad information, and I see that our shellfish warden is online too. So if I need to be corrected, please, Nancy, step in and do so. Our mooring field itself is not, you know, where the boats actually are is not a shellfishing area. But around the edge, beyond the edges of it, are shellfishing areas. And my understanding is that the recreational area is closed until after the boating season. And that's where I may need to be corrected on. But we also do have a couple of shellfish farms beyond the periphery of the mooring field. And I'm wondering how any of this impacts them if they're not actually in the mooring field.
Sure. So we have lots of examples of mooring areas throughout the state that approach the shoreline but don't reach the shoreline. And the shoreline, say a swath of maybe 100 feet or 200 or 500 feet, is not part of the mooring area and remains open to harvest. Those mooring areas are assessed. And if they're deemed to not be a pollution source, then it doesn't affect those adjacent areas. If it is a pollution source, or if it's not adequately monitored, patrolled, enforced, then it could affect the surrounding areas. And we would have to run a dilution analysis with a dilution calculator to see how much of a buffer zone we would need around that mooring area. That's why it's important for these areas to, you know, be patrolled and have everything documented. So when the time comes that we're audited, we can say, look, we're doing everything right to protect public health. We don't believe this is a pollution source. We don't believe it affects the adjacent shellfish areas right around it.
So right now, to my knowledge, there's no monitoring of vessels that are being moored. The Marina regulations do not allow for liveaboards inside the mooring field. We have a deep water mooring area in the outer harbor where people can do that, but inside there, it's prohibited. We do have a small number of transient moorings for visitors, and they do stay on their boats for short periods of time. So I'm wondering if there's something we're going to need to do going forward to bring ourselves into any sort of compliance that might be necessary.
Yeah, I think if you were to, again, refer to the requirements in that matrix, probably for a category 4 or type 4 mooring area where liveaboards, pardon me, overnight stays are allowed, it could be as simple as, do those transients let someone know that they're coming in and are going to spend the night on the boat? You have a record of that fits that bill. That's okay. Maybe the occasional spot checking of Y valves and through hulls. You don't have to get on every boat every night that they're out there, but the occasional check and document that and provide that if it's asked of you, that's sufficient.
Thank you.
I could add, Again, this is to keep the mooring area proper, inside the mooring area as defined, open. If the mooring area is closed during the boating season, and we've defined that mooring area to account for the potential for discharge. So we're saying, okay, if there is illegal discharge, we've done a dilution calculation that says this mooring area is appropriately sized already. To not have to worry about closing adjacent area. So if that mooring area is currently closed during the boating season and you're just fine with that, you don't have to do anything else.
Yeah, like I said, the mooring area itself is never open, actually, the actual mooring area. It's around the edges. I guess my main concern is where the aquaculture grants are located, because they're always in operation. But they're at some distance from the actual mooring field.
And are you talking about the Chipman's Cove mooring area?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's closed May through midway through May through October 15th. So again, doesn't apply. Doesn't apply. It doesn't impact the surrounding area.
Very well. Thanks.
Yep.
I have a follow-up question if nobody else is.
Sure, go right ahead.
The select board this past year voted to extend our Marina season. It used to close October 15th. It's now extended to November 1st. We may in the future be looking at moving back the opening date from from what is it now? May 15th to May 1st. Is that something we need to report formally to the DMF?
I would certainly work with your area biologist, because a legal notice has to go out from us to open and close the area. I suppose a town can have a different opening date, but it can't open before we legally open it, before DMF does.
Right. Okay, all right.
Yep.
I'll bring the necessary
It
people.
looks like Amy Croto has some comments and questions. So she just, as a heads up, Amy was saying the Katuitt Town Landing is not subject to seasonal water quality closures and fits the type 4 mooring area, but wasn't on the list. So that is an area that she could potentially have opened with these additional patrolling, documentation, and verification. So she'd like to visit having that open.
Sure.
Yeah, so again, just to reiterate what Matt already said, this policy is meant to give some options, particularly for areas that have been closed during the boating season. Yes, it's extra work to take that path, but this is a way to keep it open. While we didn't get written up as a deficiency, FDA's made it very clear that their guidance is that all of the mooring areas should be closed while the boats are occupying the moorings. So they basically have agreed that we are in compliance with the MO. We're conforming with requirements of the model ordinance, even if we're not necessarily taking their guidance.
Chrissy, I'll just add, because I know Holly's on the call and she's the area biologist for Amy in Katuitt, and that area is closed. It's a closed mooring area for the boating season. That's why it wasn't on the list. So it is just a good example of a mooring area that's closed because it's a mooring area, not for seasonal water quality, and can be open. It's we didn't miss it. It's just an option that Amy now has in her pocket if she chooses to act on it. Yep.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep. Okay, anybody else have any questions?
Hello, sorry, I don't know where the hand raise button, I can't seem to find it, but Donovan from Oak Bluffs, can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay, yeah, just two questions for you guys. when you guys have the checklist there for what is required for a Type 4 mooring field to keep it open, it has the, the random inspection of the through holes. What is the random inspection? So, and the reason that I'm asking that question is this area that we have on the list in Lagoon Pond here is a very heavily transient area. The island, Martha's Vineyard itself, is a very transient area. And so while we do have bylaws in place that restrict overnight anchorage in the area to 3 days max, we get a lot of turn and burn, boats coming for a day or two and then leaving, and boats coming, and it's a constant chasing them out after the 3-day thing. Some of these are big vessels, some in excess of 80, 100 feet that are in this area, big sailboats or pleasure yachts and things. And so when I hear random verification of through hole fittings, that I guess I'm looking for a little bit more of what is random. Is this just something to say that if we do get audited, there's something on paper that says we looked at a couple of boats? Because there's a very big difference, in inspecting a through hole on a 22-foot cabin cruiser as there is to inspecting the through hole on a 80-foot pleasure boat that you're going inside of that has multiple rooms. There's safety concerns there along that line. So, while our big potential pollution sources are bigger vessels, and we have 100 plus of them, I would say, that come into the lagoon per year and stay their appropriate amount of time and then leave. Those, if we're looking at this from a public health perspective, those would be the ones that are the biggest pollution sources, but those are the ones that are also the most difficult to check and to get into compliance and to do the through hole inspection. So I guess my question is what really is the standard for doing these inspections on a vessel? Because that to me opens up a whole nother can of worms there.
Yeah, I'm not sure we have a standard, right? This is all brand new. Random means random, occasionally jumping on a boat here and there. If you hit a 23-footer one day and next week you hit an 80-footer, great. It shows you've covered the spectrum. I think it all comes down to how important is that area for your town shellfishing, and what's the best way to justify keeping it open? And that includes some level of proof that folks are checking the through holes, checking to make sure that people don't have them open, aren't accidentally spilling. I'm hesitant to put a number on it. I'm not sure I would even know how to assign a number, but not doing it at all shows that we're not checking them, right? So at least a handful seems to me to be a really good start.
Okay, so there's no metric of how many how many transient boaters you might have overnight in an area per season, and a certain percentage of them need to be checked, kind of thing. It's literally just random.
I believe it is, yes.
Okay.
Chrissy, feel free to weigh in if you feel strongly on that.
Yeah, I think and they don't check in at all. There's no way of them. So one of the requirements is that they need to be notifying the harbor master, however you want to make that work in your town, that they will be staying overnight. And so how would that happen with transients? Like, would there be signage as you're going, under the bridge, or however that would work? And then
Yeah, that I will say, since we had that audit last year and we worked with Simone Wright to kind of come up with the plan that we have, part of that is the prior check-in with the harbor master, and we do have paytons that say max 3-night anchorage, must check in with the harbor master. But I will say that out of all of the metrics on that checklist, that has been the hardest one to comply with, is having that notification that they're going to be there, because that has never traditionally been the thing. We've done signage, we've tried to do notifications, but it ends up pretty much happening retroactively, where these vessels will come anchor, we find them while on patrol, either contact the owner, put a violation notice, get them to try and move to the area, normally of which they are compliant with. But yes, that previous notification that we're going to be staying there is definitely something that we are struggling with as a town.
Yeah, and I would say with transients, as you said, they're the highest risk, right? So
Right.
in not patrolling and trying to do some level of enforcement, you could find your areas being downgraded in classification because of the partying and the illegal discharge that could be going on with the transients. We've made the point over and over and over again with the FDA that with these communities that have waiting lists for mooring areas, some 25-year waiting lists, right? We don't consider them a risk. Nobody's going to risk losing their mooring over a discharge. The transients, that's a completely different story. They don't have a stake in,
Right.
in their mooring. So they're your highest risk, and they're the ones that could result in your entire area being downgraded. So
Right.
I think from the community's perspective, from the town's perspective, they're the ones you want to try to, be on top of in terms of enforcing, and, maybe you focus a little more on those than the resident that has a mooring out there.
Right. No, understood. Thank you.
Anybody else? Any additional questions?
I do have one comment. So Matt had a slide showing what the existing model ordinance, which is the 2019 revision, what the definition of a mooring area is. We're not sure why the 2023 hasn't been published yet, but it hasn't. So technically this marina and mooring area policy, specifically the mooring area part of it, is not valid until the 2023 model ordinance is published. Until that's published, we're still subject to the requirements of the 2019. So that's where, getting this marina and mooring area policy out a couple weeks ago to try to have this conversation before we actually are a go on the new mooring area definition and the new model ordinance requirements. So we're implementing it, we're starting to get things rolling, but technically until the FDA and the ISSC published the 2023 revision of the model ordinance, we are still subject to the definition that requires us to consider all areas that have more than 20 boats, whether it's a little, sailfish or, large boats. So fortunately that change was adopted, but until it's actually published, we are still subject to the original 2019 definition of a mooring area.
And just to be clear, I'll add to that, it will be published. It was proposed, it was voted on, it was accepted, FDA conferred. Everything is in place. It simply hasn't been released to the public. That's what we mean by published. So there's no doubt that's going to be the standard. It simply hasn't happened yet, but it's about to. Okay, anybody else?
I just want to, oh, hi. Let me see if I can start my video. Sorry. It's Danielle. Hi, hi, Matt. Thanks for the
Danny.
presentation.
Yep.
It kind of made me feel a little bit more at ease because, like, things changed. I'm looking at the 2019 one and, freaking out. I just want to say a couple things. I haven't seen any 100-foot boats in the lagoon, but there are some transient boats, but I'm out there all the time and I do patrol on the Vineyard Haven side just to see if there's anybody that's anchored in it. And, I'll just have a casual conversation with them, and try to keep it as friendly as possible. But if you look at the book that I had from last year, it's a mess because it was like a Write in the Rain notebook. So I'm wondering if we could you think Mooring Info is a system that you guys can get on board if we just, I don't know, send you that information? How are you guys able to?
I think Chrissy touched on that earlier. we're certainly open to discuss it. I'm not sure what the best way to do this is, but if towns want to do that, I assume we could explore that possibility, correct, Chrissy?
Yeah, as long as, whatever method you use, as long as you have the ability to pull up your documentation of your patrols and show us. And so we annually will be looking to see, so that is gonna be part of the performance criteria for your conditional area management plan. So we'll need to annually verify that you're meeting the performance criteria. And so whether you have mooring info, pull a PDF that you can send to us, or, you know, I think there's more than one way that we can transfer that information to DMF. But yeah, I know other towns have asked if mooring info could be actually, you know, I think Brewster has asked if they could even incorporate the Vibrio compliance monitoring form into mooring info, so that checklist is happening on that platform. And, you know, that's fine as well. You know, so however the community finds it easier and how they can best comply with the performance criteria to keep these areas open, should they choose to keep these areas open, we'll work with you.
Okay. Thank you.
John Wolf?
Quick question, is the table that you presented earlier, is that available on your website? If I want to download it and print it?
It is not available on the website, but it was distributed, and so if you got notification of this meeting, it came from the same email, yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
good to know. Thank you.
If you can't find it, let me know. I'd be happy to forward it to you, yeah.
Okay, I'm sure it's there.
Yep. Okay, looks like we're just about done here. So thank you, everybody, for your time, your patience, your understanding. I know that when that came out, you know, you look at that matrix and everybody started scratching their heads like, oh no, it's really not that bad. I guess we just needed to explain our position a little and show you how it was not as big of an impact as maybe people first thought. If there's any additional questions, feel free to reach out. Start with your area biologist. If you don't know who that is, let me know. I'll get you a name and number. Yeah, I guess that's it. Okay,
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thank you very much.
thanks, everybody.
Thank you.